Peterborough, Ontario was hit by two bands of wet weather, one on a Wednesday evening and the other early Thursday. They poured a combined 193 millimeters of rain on the city in that short event. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History, now in its second year from the Weather Network in Canada. This turned residential streets into running rivers. Flooded out basements and underpasses were literally submerged in water so deep it was totally impassable. And it all happened this day in weather history. As is the case in weather in the Northern Hemisphere, what happens in the West will almost assuredly have some effect on the East. This is the story. A severe thunderstorm originated over the Rockies and first hit Edmonton with hail. Then, as these systems go, it continued on its merry way from the northwest, southeast into the Great Lakes region of Ontario. Then, on July 15, 2004, it made it to south-central Ontario and parts of Quebec, unleashing torrential rain. The city of Peterborough said the total amount of rain that fell on the city was a quarter of what they normally get in an entire year. Welcome to year 2 of this podcast. Right now, you're listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider. But there's also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective. But oftentimes, they will include visuals from that day's event, from when it happened, in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go check out the podcast video short on television or online anytime at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. And just to dovetail from that, if I can, I'd like to remind you where you can catch this podcast. If you might be picking this up off our site or from within a story, you can look up or ask for This Day in Weather History, wherever you normally listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Alexa, and now every day on yahoo.ca. Sylvia Sutherland, who was mayor of Peterborough at the time, says the majority of the city was built on a floodplain. So on that day, the water rose up and had no place to go. They tried to control the flow by setting up dams around the city, but the water was just too much, and it was cresting over most of the dams. Under the sheer weight of the settling water, the long, flat roof of a shopping mall collapsed. A section of the roof of a senior's residence collapsed, and 200 people had to be evacuated, and cars were left floating or otherwise submerged in nearly a meter of water. Mayor Sutherland, along with Peterborough Police Chief Terence McLaren, declared a state of emergency very quickly at about 7 o'clock in the morning, and rightfully so, as immediately storm sewers were backing up after heavy rain left much of the downtown core and west end of the city underwater. The flood was especially damaging to the Peterborough Public Library and the adjoining Peterborough Museum and Archives. While such a historic flood is rare, it could happen again. If it does, the city of Peterborough says it's better prepared this time around. Mayor Sutherland said that most of the community's piping and infrastructure during that time, back in 2004, was the same that had been originally installed at the turn of the 19th and 20th century. However, since this incident, they have replaced all the pipes and invested into flood reduction projects. It was the Peterborough flooding of 2004, and it happened on this day in weather history. Hey, do you like the podcast? We'd love to hear from you. If you have an idea, go right now to wherever you're listening to me and rate us if you would, please. It's on a 5-star system, and we would love as many stars as you can afford. So rate us, but then also review us. This way we can always stay on top of how you'd like to see the show evolve. Then remember to subscribe to this podcast. Click the subscribe or follow button right there on the very same podcast homepage you're listening on. You'll be immediately reminded that the next day is ready to listen to, and you also have access to every episode in the archives. It dates back to June 1st of 2020, so there is a lot that we got to get caught up on this day in weather history. Tomorrow is July 16th, and on this day in weather history, we look back to 1996. It was then that hail measuring a diameter of 70 millimeters, that's right, 7 centimeters, that's right, 2 3/4 inches in diameter, hit the city of Winnipeg. That's summer in Canada's prairies for you. So what happened, or didn't happen in the weather for that to occur? We're going to find out tomorrow on this day in weather history with me, your host, Chris May.